The following production is intended for entertainment purposes only. We are not legal professionals. We do not speak for any government agency, and the opinions expressed here are our own. Relax.
Boom. That's what I like to do. I like to
Okay.
just get this get this party started. Let's just get it all on the record. Let's just start recording.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Welcome to Lawless Podcast with Justin and Clayton. Clayton is my buddy Justin.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. So, man, good morning.
Good morning.
It's freaking early.
It's not that bad.
It's bad for it's pretty early for me these days.
Yeah. What's your normal get up and go time?
Man, I don't know that I ever get up and go. But I got to be out of bed by 7. I prefer to be out of bed at 6:30. But it's this weird thing. It even happened this morning. It's one of the reasons I'm running late. I've got my alarm now to where it's super loud, super obnoxious. It's like the, it used to be. I used to have the soft kind of gentle nudge, wake you up gently.
Diddly dee.
Yeah. Now it's like, what's up, motherfucker? But I'll sleep through it. Like sometimes I'll turn it off in my sleep, or like this morning, it was going off for half an hour before I finally woke up.
Dang.
Yeah. So
I feel like I'm rolling the dice every time I hit the snooze button, because my phone is my alarm.
Yeah.
And so it's the yellow and the red button. I can't tell you which is which. I think red shuts it off, but I tried to get out of bed at 5. I'm not going to anymore. My sleep's gotten better. I remember months ago we were talking and I was having sleep problems. My sleep's gotten better. I still, if I want to get an early morning workout, I'll try to be up and at 'em at 5:30. If not, 6 is probably when I'm rolling out.
What time do you go to bed?
10. I try to be asleep by 10. So I want to lay down at like 9:45.
Oh.
And then sometimes I'm up watching Netflix and sending IG messages to my boys.
Yeah. Did you watch the game last night? You
Tell me about it.
You kind of hesitated, like you didn't know which game I was talking about.
Are
you not a football fan or NFL?
I'm definitely not an NFL fan. I like to watch NFL. I'm from Oklahoma. We don't have an NFL team.
Yeah.
I like the Chiefs because I live there, but I'm not an official fan. I wouldn't call myself.
Yeah. I mean, so it's nothing that like you didn't have plans around the game last night.
No.
Okay. Yeah, dude. I'm a pretty big Kansas City fan. There was a time.
I respect that.
There was I appreciate that. Probably 10 years ago or so, I was just over the NFL. Like I was just done with it. Tired of the antics, tired of just everything. So I quit watching for a while. But then
your team sucked.
And my team sucked for most of my life.
Yeah.
But then, man, it must have been within the past 5 or 6 years, my son got old enough to where he started caring. And so I would watch it with him, just because it was something, father and son to do. But since then, yeah, dude, I've really gotten back into it. It's fun. And the Chiefs are just so fun to watch.
Right. Now they are. I appreciate the Chiefs because it gave me a team to talk smack to my boys. I have some friends from the Navy that, like my buddy Josh Graham and Sean Cooney, they were both like football almanacs. So I'll give you a little behind the scenes on what happens on these aircraft carriers. Where we worked, this is when I first came in the Navy. Where we worked was in G3, was in bomb buildup. It's where we call them magazines, but there's these giant rooms that take up like the whole bottom half of the ship. Like the ship is this long. Well, from here forward, on the fourth through seventh deck below. Anyway, so like
How
you're
just out of curiosity, how long is a ship, an aircraft carrier?
a Nimitz class carrier. So the new Ford classes are bigger than the Nimitz classes. I don't know how big those are, but I was on a Nimitz class, the George Washington, and it is, oh man, I'm not going to be exact on this, but it's 1,000, I want to say in 10 feet. Some of them have like these ramp extensions that make them like 1,100 feet. But a Nimitz class aircraft carrier is as long as the Empire State Building is tall.
Okay.
Um, so, but these magazines weren't that long, even by half, because it comes down at a V,
Yeah.
the hull.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're below water and we're surrounded by bombs and missiles and these fins for different configurations and different fuses and everything. But unless we're actively bombing someone, we're just sitting around and twiddling our thumbs. Like we
Yeah.
get paid to clean the magazines every day. We take a foxtail and a dustpan and sweep up the magazines. They have these really cool. The design's got to be over 100 years old now, but they have these. It's really cool water air conditioning system where basically there's these there's like these grates above your head that have just the smallest trickle of water in
Hmm.
between these grates, and the air that comes in the room every time you open the door and every time it closes passes over those vents and it keeps it chilled.
Yeah.
And sometimes it keeps it like ice cold even when you're in the middle of the Persian Gulf. it
Really.
can it can get like super cold down there. um so while we were down there, you learn how to do a few things. You learn how to play spades. You learn how to play.
How many people are down there, like at any given time? Like how many people are you around?
Um, so there's a bunch of these trunk spaces. Man, this is all nerd vernacular or Navy vernacular, but there's a bunch of these trunk spaces. So like there's the Ford magazines on the Nimitz class. This is all public information. You can Google this. I was on a Discovery show, like the Discovery Channel filmed a show on there. Anyway,
You were on it?
I was on it for like
Dude,
a split second.
how have you never told me this?
Oh man, dude, there's so much.
I
Whiskey
gotta
Blacks.
you gotta send me the episode and the season. I'm gonna
I
look it
remember
up.
it's called Super Carriers, and I believe it came out in 2004
Okay.
or maybe 2005 because they filmed us on our '04 deployment. Um, so we'd just be sitting down there twiddling our thumbs most of the time, and you get good at playing spades. It depends what magazine you're in, you get good at playing dominoes, and you also get good at talking sports smack.
Yep.
And so sometimes, like most people are casuals, I would call, like myself. I may be even a little less than casual, but just, most people are just casuals. Like, yeah, I got a team. I know the
Yeah.
quarterback. I
Yeah.
might know a receiver or something like
Yeah.
that. But that's about it. Sean Cooney and Josh Graham will tell you like the lineup, the rosters of these teams that they're not even fans of, like just teams that happen to be in the NFL.
Okay.
Yeah, and so now, but they're like Graham and Sirens are these two Northerners. They are fans of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Sean Cooney is a fan of what's Colorado's team?
The Broncos.
The Broncos, where Peyton Manning retired from. Um, those are their teams, and so now since I spent almost 10 years in Kansas, all of a sudden I get to throw around the
Yeah.
Chiefs. Big
In
swinging.
in just the right time too.
Yeah. Like, oh, you don't have a Mahomes on your team? I
Mhm.
talk smack about I don't know if I talked about it on here, but I was working with an Atlanta Falcons team member. Did I talk about that on here?
Uh-uh. I don't think so.
Oh, um, yeah. through my business, I happened to be working with an Atlanta. I didn't know he was an Atlanta Falcons tight end. His name is John Fitzpatrick. He just made starter this year. I saw an article on ESPN. He just made the starting lineup. But I was talking smack about how good Mahomes was to an Atlanta Falcons player.
And you didn't know that he was.
I didn't know until he was huge. He was a monster. So what happened was his wife booked, or I don't know, his fiance booked and it could have been him. I still wouldn't have recognized the name,
Yeah.
but it was a female that booked the appointment. When I showed up, he was there, this tower of a human being. But like I made note of it, like, okay, there's a refrigerator. Hey, let's get down to business and start going through the thing. When I'm in his house, I see these framed jerseys and these framed footballs everywhere. And like a typical athlete's kind of, he didn't care about these things. Like the framed jerseys was just like leaning in a corner, and the framed footballs were like literally in a pile.
Stacked up, or yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, this guy's an athlete. And so I asked him, like, hey, what do you do? He was like, I play football. I'm like, okay. And so I didn't want to jump right into, are you an NFL player?
Yeah.
I was like, where'd you play college? And it was like, UGA. I was like, oh, sweet. And he was like, are you a fan? I was like, I'm an OU fan. I'm from Oklahoma. I said, but I respect the SEC, and we're in the SECs. Anyway, um, I end up peeling out of him that he's been with the Falcons for a few years, but has been in some games, but isn't, definitely wouldn't be considered a normal starter. And training camp was just starting. Anyway, we started talking about how good quarterbacks are and like how important, the relationship, because I was talking about Kansas City with Mahomes and Jake Hill or whatever, Travis Kelsey. Shit, I'm bad. Yeah, I was like, Travis Kelsey's incredible, isn't he? And he was like,
He's
yeah.
the best tight end ever.
He's like, yeah, I do the same job. I'm like, no, but Travis and Mahomes, they just got something going.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking last night, I think it was when they showed either Kelsey or Chris Jones. But have you ever noticed like these dudes are on the field, they look just normal because everybody's the same. But these guys, and you've got firsthand experience, they're just like specimens. It's unreal. Like their size and like stature is just, they're just built different.
Yeah. So I immediately Googled this guy, like when I was in the park or in the driveway of his house before like all business was concluded. I was sitting in the driveway getting my ways to go back to my house, and I happened to Google him in there, and I saw him on the field, and he's like the medium height of all the players on his team. Like I saw him on the sidelines during a game.
Yeah.
And he's not tall compared to the players on his team, but I came up to his shoulders, and I'm 6 foot. I used to be 6'1", and I came up to his shoulders.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you're a big one.
So that kind of brings up a question I've thought about before. I don't know if we've talked about it. I wonder, so if you take, so the NFL is a little bit different. Actually, the NFL is quite a bit different just because of the physical, the difference in the players. Do you think that a normal person, let's say you start with a kid, like your kid, let's say Cash, just a normal person with the right training, could they become a professional athlete, do you think? Or does it take like physically you just have to be a like 0.1% of the population, and mentally and like all those things just have to come together?
So there's more possibilities now because there are more professional sports than ever, but I don't think Cash has it in them to become an NFL tight end. Like, because there's not human beings in my family that get that big.
Well, so when you say has it in him, you mean physically? Like he's
genetically.
Just genetically.
Yeah, I don't think we have the genetics to become that big.
What about somebody like Julian Edelman from the Patriots? He was pretty small, wasn't he?
I I'm not familiar to tell you the truth, but I know there are lots. There's a pretty famous quarterback from OU that went to, oh shucks, man, I'm being a real bad fan, but he went to Cleveland and then he went down to Tampa. He was a walk on. He was a walk on for OU. He didn't even get drafted, or he didn't get recruited or anything. He was, I think, one of the last Bob Stoops quarterbacks.
Not
But
Johnny Manziel.
no, 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 no,
Oh.
no,
Who
no.
did he play for? Texas?
No, he played for, wait a second. Let me find this. Gosh dang it. Anyway, there are tons of people who could be small and work, like with work ethic, can get there.
Yeah.
But you also have to have some level of genetics, I think. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean that's not bad to say. You have to have some level of genetics because you definitely couldn't have deficiencies and be on an even playing field, even with whatever the average human size is.
Well, I'm just wondering though. So size is one of those things that, yeah, you're not going to make yourself taller. You could make yourself stronger. You could lift weights or whatever. I wonder, like, so with my son, if you if you were committed, could you become a baseball major league baseball player or basketball
Yes.
player or like just a professional athlete,
Yeah.
not counting the new sports, professional pickleball or whatever, like the main sports.
Well, even with the combat sports, I wouldn't want my kids to be in a striking combat sport professionally. But even with combat sports, there's all body shapes and sizes in there. I
Yep.
think in the UFC you can't be over 265, and there are guys who are struggling to make that. But um yeah, combat sports, baseball, there's a lot of almost Major League Baseball players. A
Yep.
ton
Yeah.
of almost Major League.
Yeah. That's a good example too, and that might even be the best example because you've got the farm system,
Mm-hmm.
and like there are so many players that just come so close. They make it to AAA and they just never get called up.
Right.
Or who knows, they get hurt or something happens, but they were so close.
Lots of injuries, lots of I think guys having honest conversations with themselves, like, I'm 35 and I'm still on this AAA team. Like, should I become an insurance salesman or should I keep making?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably a reality check that a lot of those guys have to struggle with.
Yeah, because there's levels to everything, but I think the margins are so much tighter in there. I had a talk with a guy who was on the Stripers team, a AAA team around here, and he was saying there's a lot of guys who come on and off the roster at even the AAA level. Like, some weeks we're full. It can be a week to week thing. Them taking guys on and off the roster.
Yeah.
Like, some weeks you're employed and some weeks you're not.
I wonder what somebody does that, let's say that I don't know, let's say you made it to the big leagues or even NFL or whatever, but you're just kind of not a superstar. You
Yeah.
held your own for, let's say, 3 or 4 years. I wonder what somebody like that does when they're done, because now you're retired at 32.
Yeah.
Like, do they sell insurance? Do they go coach somewhere? Um, I wonder what, again, the average, because obviously some of them end up on ESPN, some of them, who knows, but the average dude, if you looked at a roster and we're like, huh, yeah, I've never heard of this guy, but he's been playing for 4 years. He's a left guard or whatever.
I don't know. Maybe that's changed, and that might even have some reflection on what I think, like baby boomers, for example. Baby boomers, and maybe even, yeah, definitely Gen X to a degree. Definitely we're trained and we're on the job path. They're like, go to school, get a degree, Go out, get you a job, retire with benefits, yada yada. That was definitely the baby boomers, and I'd say a lot of the Gen Xers' path to the American dream was go get you a good job, mortgage yourself down, get you a wife and some babies, and die.
Yep.
Um, I think now there's definitely been a more entrepreneurial swing. I would say by necessity. Yeah, absolutely by necessity. I mean, it's just like with insurance, medical benefits aren't what they were before. But really before, it's not technically called Obamacare. What is it called? The Affordable Care Act. But that changed insurance. Like companies no longer that radicalized everything. Like insurance is no longer going to be what it was. And after that bailing or that bank bailout, 401ks aren't what they were. Like there were people who lost everything and with their 401k during that bubble of 07, 08, and the banking bailout that happened afterwards. Um Jobs just don't provide the security that they used to.
Yeah.
And you and I both know sometimes sometimes it's good to get out while the getting's good.
Well, I think that the perception is changing too a little bit, that certainly our parents and even us are kind of the end of the generation that like you're committed to the job, almost like a marriage. Like,
Yeah,
no, this is what I do. Like, this is my, you got to grind it out. You got to do it.
I'm a
Whereas
company
now,
man.
yeah. Whereas now I think people are just like, eh, they offered me something better over here, or I just don't really feel like I'm, which I think, again, for us, I think the thing that kept us and the thing that still keeps a lot of people is I've just got 10 more years before I vest, or I've just got 5 more years before I can draw, or I've just
Yeah.
got whatever. Um, but yeah, I think that people are less, we feel less committed to our employer than we used to.
And that is right. Like I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging that view of, giving your life for that couple extra 5 or 10 years to make it cross that line. Like if that makes sense to you, then by all means do it. Um, but sometimes you have to, you have to take a personal inventory, and it's all about the quality of life that you want and the quality of life that you can afford with or without this job. If you have a plan B, if you don't have a plan B, stick to what's working and maybe develop a plan B. But sometimes if you got a plan B, it might be worth it to go see what B's like for a while. You don't have to be married to anything.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that I've been thinking about. And oh, I didn't say this to you. We're some time in. We can go in the deep, depressing waters today if you want. I want to make.
Oh, yes.
I want to go deep again if you want.
All right. Yeah, man.
Um, we've talked about this a little bit before, but I think it's we just have a lot to talk about on this. Of I wrote this out when I was just thinking of like what deconstruction taught me, and I would say that's kind of the same thing as like post deconstruction, like, but what I'm referring to is the deconstruction of my Western evangelical theology, the Sunday school I was brought up with. You were Baptist, I was Pentecostal. Very similar in a lot of ways, different in some ways, but pretty close. Um, for different reasons, we don't have to go back into all of this, but for different reasons, that theology no longer worked, and we had to find something else that did. And the hard part, at least for me, was being honest and being willing to accept that some of these foundational parts of my identity, like if you talk to Clayton, definitely 10 or 20 years ago, you were talking to a spirit filled Church of God member, you know what I mean? Or maybe
Yeah.
like you were, that was part of my identity.
Yeah.
It was a foundational part. And like I said, I think some of the most painful parts, and maybe the reason that some people don't want to do it or start to approach this and then just turn around, come back into the main room, is because it's scary and you don't want to imagine yourself without that identity. I get it.
Yeah. 100%.
But post, I mean, I can't go back there. It you can't put that toothpaste back into the tube. I'm too far past that now. So, one of the things that it taught me, and I've been thinking about this with like some social interactions, some things that are going on in our society, is I don't have to be married to these ideas anymore. Like it's at least safe to look at these things that I used to just dismiss because I was told it's in direct opposition to what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, man, yeah, I don't want to get there just yet, but I've had some big ideas recently that I've been wrestling with that I used to would not even give the time of day. And I mean, I was going to say, I was think we had a school shooting here.
Mm.
We had
Yesterday.
a
Was it
day
yesterday?
day before yesterday.
Okay.
Yesterday, so day before yesterday in the county right next to mine. I'm one of the things that I do is I also substitute for the local school systems, and so some of the substitutes that I work with substitute in this school system.
Mm.
There was a 14-year-old showed up to school. I don't know all the details. I've been looking at the news reports, but um left class, came back with a gun. They locked him, like the doors locked. They're automatically locking doors, so a student went to go let him in. She saw the gun, didn't, and he starts blasting. Um
Had he made it back into school then? Or so he was trying to get in the classroom?
he was trying to get into the classroom. He was in the school. I
Okay.
don't know.
So
I don't know where the gun was. I don't know how he got it into the building.
gotcha.
I'd be interested to know that, but I know from what I read, he tried to get back into the classroom. The student stopped him. He killed 2 staff members and 2 children. So that was 2 days ago. Yesterday, the father was taken into custody.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
that.
yeah, the father gave him the weapon as a Christmas present. Is an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle. Um, Father gave it to him as a Christmas present. And man, also you come to find out that this kid had made statements about school shootings in the past, had been investigated to some degree in the past. The FBI said their line. He was on our radar.
They might just want to keep that under
Stop
wraps in the future.
stop
Like
saying that.
it doesn't help anybody. Yeah, we knew it. We called it. We knew he was going to do that.
No one likes it. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah. No, we don't think you're cool now because you knew it was going to happen.
Yeah. Actually, why the fuck didn't you stop it?
Yeah. Oh, maybe. Yeah. Maybe you could have said something.
Um, we have a history of this,
Yeah.
FBI. So, that challenges some core beliefs of what I have. Or at least I don't know. I don't have the answers. I definitely don't have the answer to this, but I would be dishonest if I didn't look at something's wrong. I think what's really wrong is there's a mental health crisis with the United States.
Yes.
And without a doubt, there is a mental health crisis.
And I think we're in a bit of a free fall.
Yeah.
Like not only are we not equipped, like it's an active crisis.
It seems like it seems like we're in the time where historians are going to look back and be like, this was when the US was losing the US. This was the fall of the US empire, which I don't think there should be an empire anyway. But I feel like this is the time. It could be. Hopefully
Yeah.
I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But the mental health crisis is mirrored by everything. We're in a financial crisis. We're in a military crisis. We're there. We're in an undeclared World War III. There is world war going on. There's war going on all around the world right now that the two big factions, the East and the West, are engaged in on multiple fronts. We're just not calling it World War III because we happen to not be sending our own troops over there. I listened to this podcast yesterday on the history of World War II, and it was given in the lens of like how World War II affects what's going on right now. Like this is pretty much all a spill out of World War II. Like the US, the banking system, the financial system, like how these powers blatantly grasped these new territories and all these new laws. Like the US empire was really established in World War II. Like that's when we, specifically with Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, we conquered land there, which we weren't supposed to do. That's against our constitution. But we won the wars in these places, and then we just left bases there. Said, hey, by the way, we're not leaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the beginning of it, was World War II. Um, World War II was started because of World War One. And like that's also a direct spill out. Hitler even said like he Germany was put on the hook from World War One to pay for everything because they, in the Treaty of Versailles, they were called the ultimate evil. Like it was everyone, all of Europe and all the world pointed the finger at Germany at the end of World War One, said, hey, not only are you the bad guy, you have to pay us all. And it was going to be impossible for them to pay it back. Like with interest, they'd still be paying it today. Germany would still be paying for World War One. And so Hitler came in and said, hey, fuck Treaty of Versailles. We're not doing that. And by the way, we got someone to blame, is people who were in power last time, and they happened to be Jewish descent. And so they started going back after all their old land. World War One was arguably it was definitely affected and won by the United States. The United States came in late in the game in World War One. Like Europe had already been stuck in this trench warfare for many years, and President Wilson, came in and basically made a power deal with England. Anyway, I don't know how I got there, but it all comes back to, man, I have zero idea how I got there. But
Well, you're talking about the mental health crisis, and you're talking about how we're in World War III.
yeah, yeah. We're in an undeclared World War III right now, I think. Or you could imagine where historians would look back and be like, and this was the beginning of World War III. We're in this mental health crisis. That is also, that's obvious to me. That's obviously true. What's also obvious that I would not have whispered just like 5 years ago, and it even still makes me kind of weird to say, is that if there's gun violence, if we have a gun violence problem in this country, on top of mental health and on top of everything else, we also have a gun problem. And as a conservative and as pro 2A, and I'm both of those things. I'm not married to conservative, but I'm a conservative, and I do consider myself kind of married to pro 2A. It feels weird to say that something needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I don't want to be I don't want to give a stereotypical response, but I just don't know. I don't know that a machine or a piece of equipment, like that's not where the problem lies.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know what to do about that.
Well, and another true thing that I would say when I was entrenched in this ideology, but is still true, is that these people were already breaking the law. new laws are not going to make what they did.
Yeah.
We're not going to stop what they did. Change of access to these firearms might stop what they did. Might have at least made it more difficult to do what he did. Like, I don't know how this could have been stopped, but there was mention of a history. Police had been called to this kid's house many times, and like there is allegations of a not stable home life. This shooter in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish, I don't know. I don't know what to say, or I don't know what, like I said, I don't know what the answer is, but I wish this kid didn't get a gun for Christmas because he
Yeah.
used that gun to murder 4 people 2 days ago.
Yeah. And so in this scenario, I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but in this scenario, you would think that this kid probably isn't the one that's breaking into somebody's house to steal a gun. If he doesn't have immediate access, because that's kind of the
Yeah.
pushback to where I think you're going is, okay, so I can't buy one at Academy Sports, but I want to go commit a crime. I'm just going to steal yours. But there are some people that they're not going to do that. Like they're more opportunists, maybe.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely the lower barrier of entry to these crimes is what's most readily available. And yeah, he could go steal a gun. And in that idea's defense, those that MS-13 gang that took over those apartments in Aurora, they did that with mostly stolen weapons, is what the reports are coming out, or illegally gotten, like
Yeah.
illegally purchased weapons.
I
Like,
wonder if you could say now this I think really pushes on rights, but I wonder if you could say like make a law that if you have a firearm that there's got to be a reasonable and secure storage for it.
yeah,
Like, and so what I mean by that, where I say like it's the government that has zero business in my house.
right.
Like they've got zero business checking what kind of safe I've got or where I've got it or what the access is to it. But at the same time, could that be a reasonable um, a reasonable attempt to kind of fix what we've got going on here? Like, yes, you can own as many AR-15s as you want, but where are they located and how are they accessed? Kind
Right.
of like a swimming pool. Yeah, you can have a swimming pool, but you got to have a gate around it. You've got
Yeah.
to have, restrict access to it.
I, for years, I have compared firearms, at least in my own personal philosophy, I've compared them to vehicles. Like, yes, you can own as many vehicles on your property as you want, but to bring them onto a public road, to legally operate them on a public road, we have to know that you can safely operate this vehicle. And we have to know that this vehicle isn't going to break down on the interstate. Like there has to be some type of inspection to know that you can operate this vehicle and you can do it. That's if you're bringing it onto these public roads. If you on your property, if you want all these monster trucks and dirt bikes and yada yada things that aren't typically driven on public roads, have them. And you're free to do with them what you want on your property as long as you're not affecting other people's property.
Yeah.
But to bring these onto the public road, there has to be some barrier of entry to make sure that there's not a 14-year-old driving it into oncoming traffic.
Yeah. Which you'll still get. I mean,
Yes.
that still happens. 14-year-old steals grandma's car.
Uh-huh.
Um, but you're thinking though that at the very least, some lives would be saved because at
Yes.
the very least, some of these kids or even adults just aren't going to go through the trouble of acquiring the gun, and then
Yep.
maybe by the time they finally get the gumption to do it, maybe that's past and it just doesn't happen.
Well, I tell you this, I'd be safe, obviously I can't put myself in this kid's mental shoes, 100%, like it's just impossible for me to identify him with that. But I know the majority, almost all every historical figure that's been a bad guy has felt justified in what they were doing.
Yeah.
So if this kid in his warped, deranged, nonsensical mind in the mental crisis he was going through, if he felt justified to bring this gun into school and to murder these people and to injure others, he thought he was doing the right thing. I don't know if that's different than someone working for a criminal organization. Even they might be thinking they're doing the right thing, but they know they're breaking the law. They know that this is for money probably, or for the gang. They know they're not being the better. It's not for the betterment of the community what they're doing. But this kid in his it's possible that in his warped mind, he thought that he was doing right. It's possible. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, but I think even the first scenario, I think that the gang member still thinks they're doing right, because
Sure.
I think that anything that we do, any action we take, there's like, I'm not sure that that your mind will allow you to do something that you haven't justified in your mind, whether it's murder or theft or whatever crime.
You might have to do some mental gymnastics to get there.
Yeah, like it's completely illegitimate. But I do think that any decision we make is somehow based on us thinking that, well, it's justified.
It's the
You know,
appropriate decision at the time.
right?
And
It's
it's
appropriate for me. It might not be appropriate for anybody else,
right.
but based on my scenario, my circumstances right here and now, it's the right thing to do.
I can justify it.
Yeah. Um, I mean, that's what you're talking about with, the on your own private property, you're free to do whatever you want. But if you come into society, these are the rules for society. That sounds reasonable. I think the initial pushback would be, the good guy with a gun.
Sure.
But what you're saying isn't, it doesn't take that away. It's just saying that to be that guy, you have to prove that you are that guy.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Um,
What would Clayton from 10 years ago have said to that? Like, what would your response have been?
all gun laws are an infringement on the Second Amendment. Um, it's not the government has no right to tell me what I can and can't do with my own personal property as long as I'm not affecting someone else. Which there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah. I mean, that is true because you're not that guy.
Right.
And so it's one thing to say the government has no business infringing on your rights,
Right.
but the government does have significant, the FBI had some business infringing on this guy's rights.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm saying that wrong because I don't know what their investigation concluded. I certainly wouldn't want somebody to call our local FBI office and say, hey, got a couple guys you should flag because they've got, some extreme views or whatever. And now they're quote unquote aware of me. So who knows what they're aware of? Who knows what they were investigating? But yeah, there's a difference when nobody's accusing you of plotting to, to commit some heinous crime.
Or any
So
crime.
any crime. So you're maybe some crimes, but your right shouldn't be infringed upon. How, like, where do you draw the line of saying, well, yeah, but there should be.
Um, man. So really, you got to go back to if you want to get real deep, if we want to go if we want to get really in there, you got to go back to what Socrates described as the guardian of the city in Plato's Republic. But really what it's saying is you have to have leaders in place that have the sincere interest of the people ahead of anything. And I don't even know if that's possible, but theoretically it is, and philosophically it is, to have leaders that their truly only concern is the betterment of the people. like above their own and above, like, yeah, to the detriment of themselves. You have to have leaders that would sacrifice their betterment for the betterment of the people. And you have to have, there has to be checks and balances, but there has to be accountability at every level, and it has to be willing. The document has to be changed, or at least has to be possible to be changed, to be amended.
Do you think that just based on what we're dealing with, the society that we've got,
Yeah.
do you think it's reasonable to say, well, yeah, this is what the Second Amendment says, but this is not what they were dealing with. And I know that people always say, well, they weren't talking about hunting deer, they were talking about fighting the government. Yes, I get that, I agree with that.
Uh-huh.
But we're just in a different place psychologically, spiritually, mentally, everything. Could you say that, well, that was because we kind of like maybe with your kids, like there are times when there are times when this is appropriate for you, and there are times where you're just out of control and this is not appropriate. You don't get to make this decision today. I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with that because the government is us. The government is
Yes.
you and I. It's us as a population. So I'm not sure where that line is.
Right. Yeah, I don't know where that line is, but it does need to be a good conversation, because some things that Socrates got wrong in his great society, because I'm qualified to say that
I was going to say,
Socrates was wrong.
according to Clayton.
According to Clayton, I would say Socrates, that even the Guardians were very, like, it was dictatorish, the rule that they had and the power that they had. And this was a hypothetical government anyway, but like to the point of arranged marriages and arranged child upbringing. Like, it was the law that society would have a hand in the upbringing, which I think is good, but I don't know if law should be able to dictate that,
Yeah.
because I, if I want to be able to disagree. Um, Something that came to mind, if I can, is we like they didn't have the mental health problems that we had. It doesn't seem like they weren't talking about it. They definitely weren't having the childhood violence that we have, or just because of logistics, it couldn't have happened, right?
I don't know. I'm I push back on that a little bit just because I think of like even modern day examples of children engaged in violence like in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
But I want to say I agree with you. But I
Well,
wonder.
I something that might lend, I think, to your objection is what they did have in mind was the hostile natives that were in town, or just, a couple miles away. That a lot of people like Boone and, yeah, Daniel Boone in that time frame, the late 1700s, they were expanding west. They had to be able to defend themselves against the natives that they were arguably stealing their land from. They were definitely stealing their resources from, but they had to be able to defend themselves against them. They had to be able to defend themselves against bandits on the road. There was not a police force. We were against the idea at the beginning of the American experiment. We were against the idea of a standing army. Most states didn't allow a standing army, or they had a very controlled one. And the military was the police force back then, because they didn't have the idea of modern policing. So you had to have it to defend yourself. You had to have access to it, and to defend yourself against a tyrannical government. That was something that they had in mind when they wrote that. They wanted it to be weapons of war. That was the
Right.
intent. But we don't live then. Today is not then. And I
Right.
believe that is sacred and should be protected, but it also should be honestly examined. The same way that I thought the Bible, even though, this wasn't exactly on mine, but the Bible was inerrant and, and unfallible, and was the true and only word of God. Now I don't think that anymore. I believe it's holy and it should be respected, and I believe it's even special. Like a lot of religious books are even special. Um, but it should be looked at honestly. And I think the same thing applies to the Second Amendment. When I just put my kid on a bus today
Mhm.
that's 20 minutes away from where this shooting happened. It's real.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's a correlation there between where we came from a spiritual perspective. I really feel like a lot of people kind of worshiped the Bible and put it on
Yes,
a pedestal and said,
absolutely.
like, this is this perfect document. It's, it's got all of the answers for life and the afterlife and all of the stuff. And we do the same thing with the Constitution.
Absolutely.
Like, there are people that worship it to the point where, like, nothing, where you would say it's inerrant, infallible, a complete word of God. Well, it was
Shall not
great.
be infringed.
It was great back then, and it's great now.
Yes.
But it's a little bit of a. I can see where you could make an argument that says it's a different playing field. It's a different
Yes.
game altogether.
I mean, so the founding fathers anticipated this happening. That's why they allowed for amendments to the Constitution. That's why they allowed for changes. And now it's understandably very difficult to amend the Constitution because of the rules set forth in the Constitution, but it's supposed to be difficult on purpose. They wanted it to be difficult because they didn't want knee-jerk reactions. They
Mhm.
wanted it to be a long, slow, difficult process that or at least the majority has to agree on.
Yeah.
That's why the Constitution gives way for changes to the Constitution. So even the founding fathers, which we absolutely worship in this country, or at least the right, I would say, that more conservative folks are prone to do,
Mhm.
um, they I don't think they saw this coming, but they saw the need for change as a possibility. They built in a way to change it. And I don't know what the answer is, but man, I sure am interested in it.
Yeah. Be curious to find out.
Yeah, I would like to know
Uh,
something that I want to make sure I wasn't gonna call myself a hypocrite on this, but something that I made sure after that happened is I made sure everything was locked up in a safe in my house. I made sure every firearm, made sure every weapon.
yeah.
It just reminded me because responsible gun ownership, which was not happening in this, I don't think, has a part to play in this tragedy.
Man, something that just that just came to mind is, how many times have you heard on an interview with the family of, like, we never saw it coming, or we
Yeah.
had no idea? And, because everybody says, well, my gun is in the closet and it hasn't killed anybody.
Yeah. My gun doesn't have legs.
Yeah. Until somebody that you said would never do it does it. And now, like, oh, my bad.
Now, oh, go ahead, finish.
Well, I was just going to say that, well, yeah. Okay. So you were wrong. But now
Yeah.
four people have lost their lives.
Man, I know I've seen this call come out and I know I've heard about this call or different versions of this call, but you could even compare it to swimming pools. But when you were a cop, did you ever hear of or see a teenager that stole dad's gun and did something stupid with it?
Heard
Like
of,
at
never personally dealt with,
right, same.
but it
But
happens.
yeah, it happens. And it's happens enough to where like I think officers encounter it. Or
Mhm.
like it said, at least in the vicinity of it. Swimming pools, there's a bunch of kids. Like in my last year in the sheriff's office, because I saw a lot of kids killed in my last year. Um, there was like three that comes to mind of kids that passed away in the swimming pool because grandma went into the kitchen or, you know,
Mhm.
they thought they knew how to swim
Yep. They
or
figured out how to open the gate.
yeah. And that same tragedy, and pulls do kill more kids, far more kids than firearms, but that same tragedy could happen with the gun on the nightstand or the gun in the closet,
Mm-hmm.
or man, the gun on top of the refrigerator. Because yeah, responsible gun ownership has a part to play in this.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, is new laws wouldn't change unless they were access laws, which maybe, but it's worth a discussion. But they
But you
were
know what?
already breaking law.
But you know what I think it is? And I got to say that because I slept through my alarm for 30 minutes, I've only got a few minutes before I got to get.
That's fine.
What what really has to happen though is not it doesn't take a law for you, Clayton Blackwood, to say, you know what? I'm just going to make sure all of my guns are locked up. I'm going to make
Yeah.
sure everything is secure. There was some kind of a realization, a moment of truth. Something happened with you where you said, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. So somehow, maybe we don't need laws. Maybe we just need people to realize it could happen. It could come from your house.
Yeah.
Like, just be responsible. Don't assume that your kids or your whoever would never do it, because nobody would ever do it until they do.
Yeah. It's worth self-evaluating. It's worth having an honest conversation with yourself. And it's also worth having a conversation with your family and with your kids. Be like, hey, I know we've talked about this before, but let's go over it.
Yeah.
If you see a gun, what do you do? Tell an adult. Do you ever touch it? No. And this is how we make sure a gun is safe. This is how we make sure a gun is clear.
Yeah. But you know what else is maybe even more important? Is just having conversations with your kids about how are you doing.
Yes, yeah, of course.
But but I think that there are a lot of people that skip that and we jump straight to the guns and say,
Yeah.
what's the problem? We've got this mental health crisis, we've got this gun problem, we've got this
Yeah,
violent crisis, whatever. But we completely skipped that whole section of how's it going?
for sure.
What's up in your life?
Like I said at the beginning of this, I think is that the real problem that we're having is a mental health problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, we're even in free fall. I think the society, and for lots of reasons. Maybe it's because we've all lost our faith, but I don't I don't know. But there is a mental health problem, and that's definitely more important than the gun problem.
Yeah. Um, man, I read an article the other day about actually I think I might have looked it up. But I found an article the other day that was talking about the spiritual but not religious. Is that the term? SBNR? Yeah.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that demographic?
I think I've heard that used as like a slur.
That's how I've always used it. That's how I've always heard it.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden I feel like I'm right. Like I'm firmly in the middle of that group.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say is, I think well, no, I know there is. We've talked about it before we started doing the podcast. There is a revival, so to speak, in our generation, in our culture, of people that are leaving organized religion but finding spirituality.
Yeah.
And in the past, I would have looked at that as a bad thing, and I would have looked at that as like, what does the church need to do to keep people from leaving? Blah blah blah. But now I look at it as a good thing. I think it's fantastic. And so I'll be kind of curious how that plays out with the whole mental health crisis and everything. But part of
Yeah.
it might be that just the fact that we're losing our religion because we've lost our identity.
Yeah. Well, and something that I think is fair to say is that I don't think we failed religion, or we didn't fail the church. The church failed us. The church had an opportunity to change. The Dalai Lama has been very open. He's a leader in Buddhism, obviously specifically Tibetan Buddhism, but he's said for many years that if what we believe doesn't match with science, then we need to change. We don't need to make science change for us. Then we need to come and match the studies. And the church had the opportunity to do the same thing. Buddhism's technically been around for longer than Christianity, but Christianity, the Holy Roman Church, historically, it's pretty easy to point to that it was all for power. It was politicized starting at, before Constantine, but officially at Constantine, it was all government. The people that we don't trust now are the people that made the church in the same exact way. But church failed us. Western evangelicalism failed us. It should have been honest, and it should have addressed these questions, because I'd be more than happy to stay there if they would have addressed these concerns, these contradictions in the Bible, these translation issues, these questions of like the scripture meeting my real world problems. Those things didn't always match. They should have been better at addressing those.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't change, and they didn't answer those. So that's why I had to leave.
Yeah.
But I also still like the idea. I know we're about to end, but I like the idea that Carl Jung introduced me to through an Audible book, of the difference between creed and religion. And I still like Christianity as my creed, as my family creed, as a set of values, and even as an identity marker, because I think that's important to some degree. I don't think you should be married to it, but I think it's important. And like, to raise my family in, I think Christianity is a-okay for that, even Western evangelicalism. But it's not my personal religion. It's not the relationship that I have with the God of the universe.
Yeah. Well, I like that. What I don't like is that I've got to leave.
It's all good.
So let me hit that.